Jelem lungonet romengsa Imaladilem bahtale romensa Jelem lungonet romensa Imaladilem bahtale romensa.
Hi, let me be completely honest. My whole life I've been hearing the same sentence. Roma come from India. Teachers said it, books repeated it, encyclopedias, documentaries, even Wikipedia. And when you ask anyone today where Roma come from, almost everyone answers without thinking, well, from India. But almost nobody ever stopped and asked, is that even true? Nobody asked who invented this theory in the first place. Nobody asked whether Roma themselves were ever part of that conversation. Nobody questioned whether the story makes any real sense, so we just accepted it, because for a long time, we had no way to check the truth. During communism, we couldn't travel, we had no access to information, and everything written about us was written by people who never lived with us, never spoke with us, never felt our world from the inside. But me, at one moment I just said, enough. Enough repeating the same sentence again and again. Enough letting others decide who we are. So I started searching, reading, watching, listening. Documentaries, researchers, historians, linguists. And in the last years I discovered something essential. The whole Indian origin story is built on assumptions. On the idea of a single scholar in the 19th century, a man who never lived with Roma, never sat at our table, never heard our language spoken from the heart. And yet his idea shaped books, education, media, the whole world. So I told myself, fine, they say we come from India, then let's look at how people in India actually live. And when I started researching, I was shocked. Purification rituals in a river where burned human remains float. People washing their bodies there, sometimes even brushing their teeth. Some castes using cow urine in rituals, a caste system deciding who can touch whom, rules for women, children, whole families. And right away, I knew, this has nothing to do with us, nothing with our soul, our culture, our way of life. And then I looked at today's scientific studies, modern DNA research, linguistic migration studies, university papers from around the world. And all of it shows clearly, Roma are not an Indian caste. We are not a Hindu community. That story was never ours. And do you know what hurts the most? That if someone had shown our grandparents how life in India really looks, if someone had told them about these rituals, the river of death, the caste rules, the cow worship, no Ram on earth would ever accept the idea. This is where you come from. That's why I want to show it here. Not to insult anyone, not to attack any culture, but because we have the right to know who we are, and the right to say out loud, this is not our story, it never was. So, let's start from the very beginning, without fear, without censorship, with respect for truth. And now I want to tell you something that truly shocked me. Because when I started searching for the origin of that famous idea, the idea that Romani people come from India, I discovered it all leads back to one single man. Everything began with one German scholar, Heinrich Moritz Gottlieb Grellmann. You've probably never heard his name. I hadn't either, not until I started digging. In 1783, he published a book claiming, for the very first time, that Romani people came from India. And why did he believe that? Because he heard a few Romani words that kind of reminded him of Sanskrit. That was his entire argument. He never went to India. He never lived with Romani families. He never heard our language from inside our culture. He did no genetic research, no anthropology, no migration studies, nothing. He simply compared a couple of words, and then filled in the rest with imagination. And the unbelievable part, Europe believed him. Scholars copied his idea, books repeated it, schools taught it. And within a few decades, one man's guess became a historical truth accepted all over the world. And Romani people? No one asked us. No one listened to us. No one even wondered if it made sense. But now I'll tell you something Grellman could never have known, because his time didn't have the tools we have today. Today we have genetics, we have linguistic reconstruction, we have migration analysis, ancient DNA, and research institutions that can trace the movement of languages and people thousands of years back. And these studies all reveal one essential fact. Sanskrit did not originate in India. It was brought into India from the outside. Here are the scientific sources that confirm this. Harvard University, Reich Lab. Published in Cell, their research clearly shows that Indo-Aryan languages, including Sanskrit, arrived in India from the northern Eurasian steppe, from regions that today are Russia and Kazakhstan. University of Cambridge, Indo-European Linguistics. Independent linguistic studies confirm the same thing. The roots of Sanskrit lie outside of India, on the Eurasian steppe, not in the Indian subcontinent. Oxford University, Nature Journal. Genetic and linguistic reconstruction shows that Sanskrit was not created in India. It was adopted by local populations when new groups migrated into the region. And here is the most important point. If Sanskrit isn't originally Indian, then the similarity of a few Romani words to Sanskrit cannot prove that we come from India. The entire Indian origin theory was built on a language that did not originate in India. This changes everything. If scholars in the past had access to today's science, if they had known where Sanskrit really came from, if they had understood migration genetics, maybe they would never have written that theory in the first place, and maybe our people wouldn't have spent generations believing something built on nothing more than a guess from one German scholar more than 200 years ago. But today, we are not blind. We have knowledge they never had. We have facts they couldn't imagine. And we have the right and the responsibility to speak the truth out loud.
Paris, Roma,
I don't want to insult anyone or put anyone down, but if someone claims that Romani people come from India, then it's only fair to show how life in India actually looks. And let's start with the most famous place of all, the river Ganges. People call it holy. They say it purifies the soul. But the reality is something very different. Every single day, the ashes of thousands of cremated bodies are thrown into that river. Human remains float there, bones, hair, fragments of flesh. And right next to that, people wash themselves, brush their teeth, drink the same water, and believe it cleanses them from sins. You can watch hundreds of videos, and I did too. And let me tell you, this has absolutely nothing to do with Romani culture, Romani life, or the Romani soul. And that's only the beginning. India has something called the caste system, a division of people into ranks of purity. Some people may touch only certain groups. Some cannot enter the house of others. Some are forever placed at the very bottom, the so-called untouchables. And this system has lasted for thousands of years. And we, the Roma, we are the complete opposite of castes. In our world, family is everything. Everyone can sit at the same table. No one is higher, no one is lower. That equality, that closeness, that is our DNA. Then there are rituals that are completely unimaginable for us. For example, the use of cow urine as a cleansing substance. In India, it is commonly drunk, applied on the body, and used in religious ceremonies. For them, it is sacred. But imagine that among our people. Imagine telling an old Rom, your traditions come from people who bathe in a river full of ashes and purify themselves with cow urine. I know exactly how that would end. A Rom would look at them, cross himself, and say, that's not from us. And he would be right, because that world has nothing in common with the Romani soul, our faith, our heart, or our traditions. And you know what the most ironic part is? This whole Indian theory was created long before anyone in Europe even knew what India truly looked like. People just copied old books and repeated them as fact. But we have the right to say, this is not our world. This is not our origin. And it never was. And now, let's move on to where our real story begins. And now I want to tell you something every Rom in the world deserves to hear. Everyone today talks about DNA. DNA says Romani people come from India. DNA proves an Indian origin. Let me say this clearly. DNA is not proof of origin. No scientist on this planet can tell you where a nation began. DNA can only show where people mixed at some point in history, where they might have lived for a period of time, and how they migrated. But DNA will never tell you where a nation was born, who the first ancestors were, or what their spiritual identity was. It cannot tell you how they lived or what kind of soul, character, and heart they carried. DNA cannot read the soul of a people. And that's where the entire Indian theory begins to fall apart. Around 15 years ago, when DNA tests started becoming popular, they told people South Asian, Indian origin. Everyone believed it. But that result only meant one thing, that somewhere in history, some genes mixed with people who lived near India. Nothing more. Today, many years later, those same laboratories changed their wording. My own family took a DNA test, and the result no longer says anything about India. Today it says Eastern European Roma 45%, not India, not South Asian, but Romani people living in Eastern Europe. Which means DNA cannot tell where a nation comes from. DNA only shows where people lived or mixed during certain periods. And this is the most important point. If DNA cannot determine origin, then nobody can claim that Romani people come from India. Because no test, no lab, no university can prove it. And if 30, 50, or even 100 years ago, our people had access to the information we have today, if someone had told us, DNA cannot determine origin. Sanskrit did not originate in India. Indian rituals have nothing in common with Romani life. Then no old Rom would ever accept the sentence, "You come from India," because we always knew who we are, our soul knows. And no laboratory can take that away. And it's important to say this out loud, because until now, our story was told by others, not by us. And one more thing needs to be said clearly. People who work in today's Romani studies will never accept this truth easily. They spent decades building their careers on the old theory. They wrote books, articles, theses, they received grants, recognition, and money for it. And now, when it becomes clear that the foundation of their theory was built on assumptions, mistakes, and a misunderstanding of Romani people, of course they will resist it. Because accepting the truth would mean admitting they taught something untrue for decades. It would mean they relied on the mistake of one German scholar from the 18th century, and they never understood the Romani soul, because they never lived among us. But we have no obligation to protect someone else's mistakes. We have the right to speak our truth. You know, sometimes I feel like people have said everything possible about us Roma, where we come from, who we are, what we are. But there is one thing almost nobody talks about, something that lives inside us, deeper than anything else. We Roma have always believed in one God, not because it was written in a book, but because it was written in our breath, in our songs, in our grandmothers praying quietly by the window at dawn, in our grandfathers who folded their hands before they sat at the table. And do you know how you can see it? By the way a Rom sings. When a Rom begins to sing, even if it's a happy song or a sad one, there is always a voice inside it, a voice that speaks to God. Sometimes it's a plea, sometimes gratitude, sometimes just a whisper, "Del, hold me." But it is always a prayer, always. A Romani song is not just music for people. It is a prayer that rises upward, even if the Rom who sings it doesn't realize it. His voice carries something not from this world, something that doesn't come from learning, but from the heart. And no matter where a Rom lives, in England, in Australia, in the Czech Republic, in Slovakia, when he starts to sing, you can hear God's trace in it, because a Rom has never forgotten where his strength comes from, not even in the worst times, not in hunger, not in injustice, not in pain. While others became bitter, a Rom sang. He sang so he wouldn't break. He sang so that God would hear him. And that's why I am certain of one thing. This has nothing to do with India. Their gods are many, their rituals are different, their faith stands on castes, symbols, objects. Romani faith is something else. Pure, direct, alive. A Rom doesn't need a statue to know that God exists. He needs only his voice, his song, his heart. Wherever he stands in the world, if he closes his eyes and begins to sing, that is our prayer. That is our current. That is our home. Del Janelle, God knows, and our voice tells him every single day. And you know, the deeper I went into this whole topic, the more I began to understand one thing, that our story was never told by us. Others spoke for us, scholars, writers, politicians, ethnologists, but no one ever asked the Roma themselves, how do you feel it? Where is your heart, your soul, your memory? So I started asking Roma all over the world, from England, from America, from Australia, from Canada, from Slovakia, from the Czech Republic, from Macedonia, from Romania. And do you know what's fascinating? Every one of these people lives a different life, in a different culture, with a different story. But when I asked them, do you feel you come from India? They didn't need even a second to answer. Every single one of them said, no, never. And that shocked me. Because how is it possible that Roma living thousands of kilometers apart in completely different parts of the world all feel exactly the same? How is it possible that none of them feels any connection to Hinduism, to castes, to Indian society? And then it hit me. Because origin is not something written in an encyclopedia. Origin is what you carry inside. Our music, our family, our faith, our energy, our sorrow, our joy, our heart. None of that matches India, but all of it matches the people who once came from the northern steppes. People full of fire, movement, music, expression, freedom. And if modern science says that Sanskrit came from the north, from the steppe, if DNA studies show that Roma do not fit into Indian caste structures, and if we ourselves feel no Indian roots at all, then why should we continue repeating a theory invented at the desk of one German man 200 years ago? And that's why today I want to say one simple sentence. We are not an Indian legend. We are a Romani reality. And this time, this story will be written by us. No matter what others have told us, no matter what theories were written about us, one thing has never changed: our heart. We do not belong to any caste. We do not belong to any land that does not know us. Our origin is not written in textbooks. Our origin is written inside us. And so, after all those lies and assumptions, after all those attempts to explain us without us, we say aloud just 3 simple words: Amen Sam Roma. We are Roma, and we know better than anyone else who we are. Achen Devleha, stay with God.